What's up? It's Mike.
It's Josh.
And today is Wednesday the 27th. It, oh, damn, Josh. It was the 27th or the 22nd.
It's the 27th.
I'm always. Is it the 27th?
It's the 27th.
That's weird.
That was, and this is part two of a two-parter episode we did. We first started on the 20th, and it got real weird, so we had to cut that weirdness into two and make two weird episodes out of one. So we hope you'll enjoy this. Go ahead and have a listen for the second of a two-part episode. About I want to say it was it Bill or Kenny? One of the two brought up the idea of abortion, I think it was, and that
yeah,
and that who really has the higher priority in life? Is it the parent or the baby? Okay, so or the unborn baby, right? Who has
right.
high priority? Who should live? And there were so many arguments for both sides, all sides, and extra sides that we didn't even no one considered, right? Some people said that the mom should live, given that there was a case where one had priority over the where one would have priority, like the mom or the unborn child. Let's say if the mom got sick and her health depended on the baby living or dying. And then some people would say oh no, the baby should. And then some people would say no, the father should have a say, even though he doesn't have the baby. And they're all emotionally driven, because at the end of the day, it seems like it's a case by case nature that shows who's right or who's closer to rightness, since no one even knows.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's a perfect point. I think I read this thing on Facebook today. It was something. I'm gonna paraphrase it because you know me and my memory, but it was something like, "Your life is better than anyone's," and then so I responded to that. I said, "Well, how about if everyone thought that? Who would be right?" Yeah, it just those little tiny thoughts is how do we justify that? How do we justify that my life is worth more than yours? If we had that notion to be an epidemic in a scientific community or any type of community, I think we will run. I will run. I will want to run to a different society, because no one would value each other. They will only value thyself. And yes, Mike, I did say that. It's good to be selfish. But I don't mean, when I mean selfish, I mean in the positive sense, okay? But you know what I'm saying?
Well, I think there's a difference between selfish and self-serving.
Yes.
I think you could be selfish and help other people. Because if you're selfish and you're an entrepreneur and you want to open up a community center for people, and the only way you could open up that community center is if you get the revenue from, let's say, a personal business, and let's say instead of you saving, all you did was just pay other people, let's say your family, your friends, out loans, just so that way they could survive. Well, then your selflessness, which feels good in the moment, maybe, would never amount to the selfishness that could have saved up to open up the community center.
True.
Something like that.
That is perfect.
So what if we took the opposite view? Everyone else, well, I don't know if that's the opposite. What was the post you had seen? What did it say?
It said, your life, something to the effect that your life is more valuable than the other person.
Do you think the opposite of that? Do you think the opposite of that is everyone else's life is more valuable than your own?
I, well, I think the opposite of the opposite would be the everyone's life is as valuable
Yeah,
as each other.
yeah,
Because then you're going back to the 1930s where you had slaves, and even back then the Europeans were slave Europeans. So it goes to that effect, like, well, if the slave master's life is more important than the slave, then the slave could get replaced, and who cares about the slave? It becomes like a Hitler type of
well,
mentality, and I just
well,
I don't agree with
let me
that.
be contrary a little bit. If the master takes good care of the slave, then maybe the slave is more important than the master because he has to do the master's work.
That's true in a sense. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that because logically it's wrong. Slavery is wrong. It's a feeling associated with slavery. So I'm going to be biased on that. But yes, I definitely hear where you're coming from, and I do agree.
Well, and I mean, I think it's good to disagree or agree because I think, as we showed earlier, we're all just coming at it from like an emotional, like memory, let's say, where like logic, it has a different sort of logic altogether. But I wouldn't say that slavery is wrong. I would say that mistreating a slave is wrong.
Okay. Wow.
What do you think?
Slavery. So we need slave companies need employees
Yup.
in order
Yeah.
to create revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, to compare an employee to a slave is
Maybe
they're
it's all right.
separate.
I think it's comparable.
Yeah, but slaves. When we talk about slaves, we also got to know that one. Okay, well, if you want to talk about that American slaves compared to the Egyptian slaves, okay, let's talk about the American slaves. The American slaves were in bad conditions. Okay,
Yeah.
they were not treated justly. Plus, after they got done working in the fields, they had crappy food to eat. That is why we have soul food because collard greens was grown and it grew from the ground. That's all they had. Let me even back it up. Fried chicken, which is a staple, which is funny, which is a staple in the black culture,
Yeah.
was actually only allowed to be eaten by slave masters because fried chicken was a delicacy at that time. So we have to, when we talk about slavery, we have to know the mentality and the environment of the slaves. Now let's go to, compared to the Egyptians, they had slaves and they ate well. Their slaves were treated well. But ancient Egyptian culture was totally different than American culture because even women had rights to vote. But this is a different subject, okay? But to get to the employee from slavery, the employee has the right to clock out and eat whatever they want. They have OSHA, which creates their safe environment. Slaves didn't have any type of organizations to look out for them. So to compare an employee to a slave, we have to really get down to the details because they do differentiate quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The American worker might not, or they might get a support that a slave back in the early 1900s and 1800s did not get at all. Like there wasn't like a slave
Right.
union or anything like that. But so I'm still gonna stretch it a little bit and say that wouldn't that just be bad mastering? Like couldn't we argue that the modern slave, no matter what color you are, no matter what ethnicity you are, no matter what nationality you are, if you work for some like corporate business and they take good care of you, could you call that good slavery?
That's a good question. Could you call it good slavery? Yeah, I guess you could.
Could you say slavery changed?
Was it a permanent change or was it a temporary change? And was it a hypocritical change? Josh, I love your questions. I, you know, just the term itself has a bad connotation, right?
It's sour.
It is sour. It's bad. It's like remember those Mexican candies you used to put in your mouth? They were sweet, then they went sour and sweet.
Not Lucas,
or they had a fiery. Yeah, it was kind of like Lucas type of deal.
Yeah.
You popped it in, and then it just did wonders in your mouth.
I know. We'd have raw tongues by the end of the day.
Everybody loved them, man. We got it from the ice cream man. But
they were great.
Anyway. Wait, then I guess if you want to really go back, I guess that is why OSHA was formed, because employers were doing bad tactics to the employees. I mean, like in New York, there was the iron workers. They would walk across beams and stuff with no harness on, and they were and the employers actually put in the bid for deaths.
There was
going to be. Yeah, there was going to be like 20 deaths in this high rise, and they accounted for those deaths.
Is that how modern day insurance was made?
You see what I'm saying?
Because we pay premiums on insurance based off of statistics like if you're 60 or 70, you pay more than a 20-year-old. Oh no, wait, you pay more or less. Because the risk is higher that you're going to die as an older person.
And if you're a younger person and you have a heart disability or heart complication or some lung disease, chances are you're not going to qualify.
Yeah. That's why there's that sweet spot of insurance payment when you're like between like 25 and 40 or 50 something.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, it would seem if the insurance at one time were bids on people that were working before OSHA occurred and before there were standards that allowed them to work in a more safe environment, and if that was like modern day slavery compared, that changed from the slavery of yesteryear. It seems like and which changed from a slavery that was different in Egypt. It seems like we get back on track with the idea that change is constant. Everything changes, but it seems like what doesn't change is like the essential identity of something. Like slavery changed all across time, but it was still slavery.
Yeah, well, the name of slavery changed. I think. Okay, let's break down slavery. We're going to do this in this episode. Okay. So, can one be mentally enslaved? I think so.
Yeah.
So all because you're not a physical slave working in the cotton fields or tobacco fields, because tobacco was a big crop at that time, and you could be mentally entrapped into yourself. I would consider that slavery.
Yeah.
You are enslaved by your ignorance. You are enslaved by your lack of self-confidence. You are enslaved by being unhappy. When are you going to break your chains? Go ahead and be selfish. Break your chains. Become free. Now, also, then you brought up this point, which I would like to highlight again, because you are one smart individual. This thing we call a society, you have to work for a job or create a job as an entrepreneur. Either way, you have to create revenue. If you don't create enough revenue, like some of these baby boomers is experiencing now, and some of these millennials, our age bracket, they're experiencing, we become slaves. We become in debt. What does the Bible say about debt? Go ahead, Josh. Chime in on that.
Well, there's a lot. Forgive us our debtors as we are forgiven ours. There's this idea that we can't know what it's like to have forgiveness from our debt unless we strive to look at others and say that whether they they have the debt of money, whether they have the debt of hurt feelings, whether they have the debt of owning something that we wanted that we gave to them, or that they possessed for a while, like ownership is 8/10 of the law, like they own it and then they're in debt to us, or we gave out a loan or whatever of some sort. Unless we learn how to forgive them for that, even though they owe us, there's no way that we could receive forgiveness for our debt from God, because it would be contradictory. It would be Hippocratic, or what's the damn word? Hypocritical. Thank you. It would be hypocritical to expect something that you think you're right about and won't give to others. It's like I'm thirsty and I got this water that I won't drink, and you're thirsty, but I won't give it to you either. And let's just say if all I had to do to get that, drink my own water, was give you some first, because I don't know, there's some way that's possible. Like I have to give you water first in order for me to drink, but I don't drink it, or I won't give it to you, then I don't drink, and then I'm just thirsty, and then I get grumpy. And then I'm like, well, now I shouldn't even give you water because I'm grumpy about something I have control of but won't do. That I won't give you water. And I think that's the only way to get change within ourselves, like you were saying earlier, that fantastic idea you said earlier, like you need to have the individual change on the inside first. But it doesn't seem that change will come from outside of yourself. It has to come from inside. And I think that it has to start with forgiving other people, like radical forgiveness, and accepting the forgiveness that we get from Jesus and God. But let's say you don't even believe in Jesus. I still think it applies. I still think it applies that you have to forgive. You have to seek forgiveness in order before you could forgive others.
Amen.
Yeah.
So I guess this begs the question of justification, right? If you seek forgiveness within others, and they forgive you of your debt, is that still the right thing? You know what I'm saying? Because, for instance, say you or I use me. I went into a restaurant. I ordered food. I didn't pay. I left. Now that money has to come from out the pockets of the owner. Who knows what the owner is going through? Now the owner totally forgave you. Does that still make it right? Because somebody has given you forgiveness. But how about if that owner had 8 different people?
That makes sense.
People.
That makes sense, Mike. I think that's a really good story to draw up. Like, let's say you went to a restaurant and you ordered some food and you walked out, and who knows what the restaurant owner is going through, whether they could afford it or not afford you walking out on them. And then they said they forgive you. Now, does it make what you did right? I don't think so. Does it make what you did wrong? No, because it was already wrong to begin with. Mm-hmm. I think what it does is in that person's mind, what changes is a state of being where they go from recognizing what you did is wrong and then deciding to hold on to that grudge and changing it to recognizing what you did is wrong and saying it's out of my hands anymore because it was never in my hands to begin with. That person did something wrong, irregardless if I was going to do something right about it or not. And then I think it's up to you as a person to go, I accept that forgiveness. It doesn't make what I did, it doesn't make the wrong thing I did right. But what it does is it makes the wrong thing I did forgiven. And I think that we do forgiveness for the sake of forgiveness as opposed for any other reason. Because if it was for any other reason, then that would just be like saying you could buy forgiveness.
Huh.
In which case,
So
it's always been free to offer.
so we seek out forgiveness for our emotions.
I don't think so. I think we seek forgiveness because we know we're finite and we can't possibly achieve perfection on our own. Like, we cannot be, like, I don't think it's just for emotions, Mike. That's what I'm saying. I think it's for emotions, for thoughts, for a state of being, for an experience, for experiencing the world differently. I mean, have you ever had debt relieved for no other good reason, but then just someone decided they didn't need to hold you in that debt anymore? Like, it's a weight off your shoulders. And
Mm-hmm.
and I would add that I've had that happen, but then I chose not to, like, I chose to accept my debt forgiven, but I didn't choose to accept it emotionally. So that'd be like a counter argument to what you're saying. So, like, or a counter example, right? Like, I didn't accept it emotionally because I didn't believe I was worthy of forgiveness. But then when I did,
Wow.
I was able to accept that forgiveness. And then that's when the change was made of my heart, right? So it went from a stony, cold heart to one that was open and warm.
That's pretty interesting. So, what makes right right, and what makes wrong wrong? What do you think?
Well, you're asking the Jesus lover. I mean, I think it's what God says it is. I think if it was ever what a human said it was, then, like, what human? Whose standard are we going to go by, right? Because if we go
Right.
by person A, B, C, or Z, we're going by someone's standard who's also compared to other people's standards. Whereas I think we need a standard that is above and beyond human creation. Like, right and wrong is something we don't make; it's something we discover, and I think that's from God, and from existing as a finite creature. Like, we're not perfect, so we never know what's wrong. So we just kind of stumble around and discover it. And sometimes we discover what's wrong because we did something real wrong, or we discover
Right.
what something's wrong because we did something right, and someone else did something. That showed that what we did was right, because whatever the circumstance happened.
So for a non-believer's aspect, I think to play on that type of aspect, I think that person will have to have factual base. It would have to be approved in a collective setting. And okay,
No, go ahead. I didn't know if you were completing a thought on that, or if I wasn't sure. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm done.
Well, can you restate that question, or statement, whatever it was?
I said, as far as a non-believer, a person only believes maybe on him or herself or another entity. I think in that aspect, that person will most likely look for the factual basis. How do you determine facts? Facts would have to be determined by a collective setting, maybe an enormous focus group type deal by educated, what we perceive as educated beings. And that would be their main, that would be the truth. That would be what is real.
That's a huge thing, Mike. I don't even know. I don't even know where to start with that one. I don't even know if it needs to be started. It's such an undertaking to say what is real. I was having a conversation with a friend at work, and he had this interesting belief that that there's no such thing as other people, right? Like there's reality, and then there's just him, and then other people are just inside of his mind.
Man, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I said I don't agree with that. I think you call that solipsism. I don't agree with that. I think other people exist. And I go, how can I thought about it for like 2 weeks because I was just like, how do I approach that even? And so I did.
How could you? Yeah.
Yeah, I did what I learned in a math class, and I made a Venn diagram. Do you remember what those are?
No, please refresh me.
You got those circles, and you draw them out on paper, and they overlap. So, and then whatever falls in one circle, and falls in the other circle, whatever is in the overlap is what they share in common, right?
Oh.
And so whatever they don't share in common, you would say they're each their own complete separate entities. So I was like, okay, all right. So the universe can't all be in my mind because there's obviously like, I have the perception of existence. So there must be something to perceive. So at least we can say that there's something outside of me. Like it can't just be me, right?
Yes.
And so I drew a circle for perception, like my perception, and then perception of reality. And then I go, okay, that's his view. He's saying there's the self and then there's reality. And everything that person learns about reality is just from himself. I said, that seems one-dimensional. Like the overlap is, the overlap in the middle between the two circles would be like all the knowledge you have, which would be from yourself. It's only one overlap. But then if you add one more circle to that model and make a second model out of it, you change it.
Wow.
And you have a third circle that says others. We then introduce a neat dynamic which plays into with what you said earlier, which was this is not like a sole enterprise. This is not just about being one person, right? Like we're a group of individuals. Right. And what was interesting is if you add that third circle that says others, you wind up actually making 4 overlaps. Because you have others and self-perception and reality. And then you can have the overlap between reality and others, and reality and self and others, and then reality, self, and others, which is the main overlap. And I think when you get that, you see a body of knowledge that shows that you don't have more than one dimension of knowledge. You don't have more than yourself unless you have others, which is a truism. Wow. And it seems like a no-brainer. But when you see it written out like that, it's beautiful compared to the one-dimensionality of just believing that you have all the answers.
No one has.
No one. Which
there's
I think.
So many meta. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I said there's so many meta perceptions of various people. You know, even me right now, I think I am who I am, but my mom has a different perspective of me. My children have a different perspective of me. My friends have a different perspective of me. I am one being, but there's people viewing me 1,000 different ways.
So then
who am I?
It begs the question, who's going to be our focus group?
Exactly. They can't focus.
We can't focus. What's interesting is you have those 3 circles overlapping, others, self, and reality. But guess what? Yeah. All those 3 circles are within the main set called the universe. Right? So then there's the actual truth, the real world. And who the hell knows what that is? except for what's out the main set of the universe, which would have to be, in my opinion, God, which would have the most complete objective view of it all, who would know like the change of everything, like the change of slavery, the change of the individual, the change of the group from beginning to end, right?
Right.
And I just think that there's maybe no focus group that can have the perspective God has outside of the three circles in the universe, as I described it as such.
Yeah, because we only have a perception of what that is. We live in what do you call it? A needle in the haystack, where we are the needle. This universe is so huge, and to have a perception, well, this is my world, and I'm doing this. It's really frivolous. First of all, two, to think that there's no life outside of Earth is really frivolous. Okay, that is extreme small thinking.
Yeah.
I think that could be another episode. We should definitely tackle that. Well, let's note that down and tackle that. But to think that we are the center, we are the sun of our universe, man, you have to walk away from that person because there's no helping that person.
Yeah, it's like sitting in the shadow of all this other hay and being like, this is what it is, the whole thing. I like your analogy.
Thank you. Yeah, we make some good points. We brought it all together. You know, we talked on many different issues, and I think people learn a lot out of this episode. I think we definitely thoroughly tackled different issues, but we tied it all in effectively.
And I would hope that our listeners ask questions. You know, Mike and I are always asking each other questions. That's what drives our communication within the podcast and outside of the podcast. It's how I'm learning from Mike constantly. And if I don't ask questions, I don't know what the hell's going on, and neither does he. Because that's literally what shows the other person what we know or don't know. And so I think that's a good first step, not only for the topic that we talked about tonight, but further topics in which you as the listener have a real clear ability to help shape the content of each episode from here on. And I would invite you to say something in the message boards about that. I think someone's ready.
Yeah. And just to wrap it up, you're right. I learned a lot from you too, and I learned a lot from other people because, just like my one of my good friends, Josh, said, he said we ask questions. Now, to fear the aspect of asking the question is just frivolous, guys. It's really an ignorant approach. Ask as many questions as you want. You will never get shut down by Josh or I, ever. Hey, even if you think it's ridiculous, ask it. Because somebody out there, how many people are in this world, Josh? 8 billion?
I think we're going upwards of that, right?
Yeah, I think so. And that's, out of those 8 billion, I'm sure you got at least 2 people that's wondering that same question. I don't know. I'm not a mathematician. But the odds are pretty good that somebody is thinking what you're thinking. So ask that question.
Yeah, exactly. That's what a good teacher says, Mike. I agree with that 100%. I agree with that 100%. All right, it's was that weird?
Isn't that weird?
That was weird. All right. This is Josh.
This is Mike.
And that was weird.
Isn't that weird?
That was weird.